Hey, people, you should be buying gold and silver, waking these people up to an alternative that they haven't seen and is a recipe for everything in this industry to be gone.
Andy Schectman states that they have never experienced anything like what they saw since last Saturday, with all the craziness in the banking system. He explains that they feel like their head has been encased in styrofoam, but other than that, they are doing well.
I'll tell you right off the bat, in 33 years and including Silver Squeeze, I've never experienced anything like we've seen since last Saturday, Sunday, with all the craziness in the banking system. And my head feels like it's been encased in styrofoam, but other than that, it's all good.
Gee, that doesn't sound too ideal, but hopefully you get a little rest in there. But why don't you catch us up to speed? Obviously, you said last Saturday meeting a week and a half ago, because first we had Silicon Valley Bank and then a couple of the other banks, and then perhaps not directly connected, yet somewhat in the same sphere, we had everything happen with Credit Suisse, seemingly risk on, risk off for a few days until over the weekend, Credit Suisse now being taken out by UBS, which sure has caught people's eyes quite a bit. And perhaps you could tell us what it's been like in the silver world and how people are responding there.
Andy Schectman explains that what is currently happening is different from the silver squeeze, and that the motivation behind the current situation is greed. He clarifies that people are motivated by greed and fear, and that those who are interested in making a profit have been somewhat disappointed over the last couple of years due to silver's lack of performance.
Yeah, when we talked last Monday, I got into it a little bit. I told you that this was different than Silver Squeeze. And you asked me, are they new clients or are they existing clients? And I told you that what this was, the difference between Silver Squeeze was massive influx and demand of all new people trying to capitalize and make a profit on what had happened with GameStop and AMC, and the ability to perhaps squeeze the commercial banks and squeeze the silver price. And people wanted to make money, and the motivation was greed. Not specifically, but if you realize as human beings, we're motivated by greed and by fear. And the greed aspect was off the charts. And we worked for days and days taking orders, people who were interested in making a profit. And those people, I think, have been somewhat disappointed, obviously, over the last couple of years over silver's lack of performance. And that's a different story altogether. And quite frankly, I think it's only making it more appealing. But what we've seen over the last week or so has been a whole different level of anxiety. It has been fear. It has been not only what happened with Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank, but also what Janet Yellen said a few days ago when she came out and was grilled by the representative from Oklahoma, who said, Madam Secretary, if indeed one of my constituents has $5 million in a regional bank and that bank goes under, you're telling us all that they'll be made whole and those banks will be bailed out, just Signature and Silicon Valley Bank did. And she said, no, that's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. And he said, I don't understand that. She said, listen, the banks will have, those banks that are not too big to fail, systemically too big to fail, let's call it, such as JP Morgan or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Morgan Stanley, any of these monstrous banks, these commercial banks, those are too big to fail. They're going to get bailed out.
Andy Schectman talks about the level of anxiety and fear in the banking system due to what happened with Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank. He discusses what Janet Yellen said a few days ago, which is that only banks that are too systemically tied to the industry will be bailed out. Andy Schectman believes that what Yellen is doing is treasonous, as it will cause small banks to be sent to the slaughter if they fail.
These regional banks, if it doesn't meet the criteria of being too systemic, and that criteria will be examined and by the supermajority of the FOMC, the FDIC, and her herself, Janet Yellen herself, by then they'll be sent to the woodshed and they will not be bailed out. Only those banks that, as she said, are too systemically tied to the industry. Evidently, that's what Signature Bank was. Evidently, that's what Silicon Valley Bank was. And what she did, as far as I'm concerned, is treasonous. What she's doing is forcing Everyone in these small banks. I grew up in Minnesota, and you go outside of Minneapolis and you're out into the sticks, and there are lots of small banks that have helped farmers and small businesses get to where they are. They know them by first name. They've been working with their family for 2 generations or longer. And now these banks will be just sent to the slaughter if indeed they fail. And when you look at these banks that have loaded up on treasuries and mortgage-backed securities over the years, paying the depositors 0.25%, buying treasuries at 2%, making 8 times what they're paying their depositors, okay, fine, they can live on that. And they're marked at par, these bonds that are on their balance sheet. They're not marked to market until they're forced to sell them, which is stupid in and of itself. But when you realize there's very little capital in the banking system, because during the pandemic, the president allowed all of the reserve requirements to be stripped down to zero. So little cash on deposit for redemptions, or when people come in and say, I want my money. And that's what happened with Silicon. And that's what happened with Signature, where there was a rumor, there was a feeling that something wasn't right, and there was a run on the bank, and they wanted their money back. And they had to sell these assets, these treasuries or these mortgage-backed securities, which are toxic right now. They've lost 50, 60+% of their value. And the only time that is realized is when they're sold. How do you come up with the cash to pay the depositor who wants a redemption? If you don't have it, you have to sell your bonds on your balance sheet, which are all have been eviscerated by the increase in rates. So you see enough people come into these banks at once, and these banks will go under in 24 hours, just like we saw with Silicon Valley Bank. And what she said is precipitating this run on the small banks, these banks that 5,000 of them around the country that have helped small businesses around America for a very long time. And all this money now is fleeing. Now, the traditional conventional wisdom says it's going to JP and to Citi and to the big banks, to Bank of America, but a lot of it is coming into this industry. And I've never experienced anything quite like this, where we're doing a month's worth of business almost every day.
Andy Schectman talks about the impacts of recent events on the precious metals industry. He warns that the supply in the industry will eventually be depleted, and premiums for precious metals are already starting to go up. He emphasizes that precious metal companies have never seen anything like this before, and the situation is like silver squeeze on steroids.
I have never experienced the type of anxiety and fear that I have seen over the past week, to where we are working, I swear to God, 18 hours a day. I could work all night long. I could work all day and all night long, replying to emails, answering phone calls. And it's hard to even explain what it's like. And there is no question in my mind that fear is a far stronger motivator than greed. And when you look at what's happening with the states like Missouri and Idaho and Wyoming and Tennessee and Mississippi and Alaska and all of these red states that are now telling their citizens, hey, we need to be able to hold gold not only in the state coffers and in our own state funds, but a lot of these states like Wyoming and Missouri and soon to be Kansas and others are allowing gold and silver to be used for all debts, public and private, not only paying your property taxes, but paying the shop owner if they should so deem appropriate. This is going to wake people up. You put another year's worth of a 16% decrease in the 10-year treasury and the stock market getting clobbered by over 20% in the S&P. You throw in instability and fear about the safety and sanctity of the banking system. And then other issues come on, like the state say, hey, people, you should be buying gold and silver, waking these people up to an alternative that they haven't seen, and is a recipe for everything in this industry to be gone. And like I've been saying on your show and others for 2 years, the little boy who cried wolf, I admit it. The wolf does come, and the wolf is coming. And one of these days, the wolf is going to eat every bit of supply in this industry. And here again, last week, I told you I was shocked that premiums haven't gone up. They're starting to go up again. They went up again on Eagles. They've gone up again on everything. And it's getting impossible to get. And if you ask any owner of a precious metals company, SD, JM, APMEX, us, Money Metals, ask them all. They'll say the exact same thing that I'm saying here right now. They've never seen anything like it. This is silver squeeze on steroids as far as I'm concerned.